Hey y'all, and welcome to Politabrawl. My name is Brian, and this U.S. Steel CEO steamrolls Jake Tapper on CNN on what really is happening with American labor and, of course, American businesses under the new tariffs. Let's dive in.
Your company exports to dozens of countries, including China. Chinese leaders now say they're prepared for a full-on trade war with the United States. If China stops buying Marlin steel, how much of a hit will your business take, or will the tariffs help you in other ways that make up for it?
Tariffs are going to be very good for the American manufacturing worker. We're very excited about this new leveling of the playing field. Right now, when we export, for example, this basket to Germany right here, it's a precision medical basket, a medical device basket. When we ship that to Germany, the German government taxes our clients $128.95 per basket. If a German competitor ships it to America, it's $1.25 per basket. It is so unfair what's happening to the American worker. They can't compete when you have that kind of unlevel playing field. We're talking about an opportunity finally to create a lot of millions of American jobs, middle class jobs, if we could get it fair. We're not looking for something over the German factory workers or the British factory workers, the Chinese factory workers. We just want to be fair. If we're fair, the American technology, creativity, work ethic is going to just do extraordinary things. And we're going to create millions of American jobs with this new paradigm. It's wonderful news.
It would be great to have the American manufacturing base back in the United States. I wonder how you counter the arguments of people such as Vice President J.D. Vance a few years ago. He feels differently now. But a few years ago, he was saying it's less about tariffs and more about automation and education when it comes to manufacturing jobs in the United States. What do you say to that?
Well, absolutely. You have to have automation and you have to have clever manufacturing techniques. You know, we have 7-degreed engineers. We make everything in Baltimore, everything in Indiana, everything in Michigan. We import nothing. But we're using wonderful innovations, novel ideas, coming up with crazy great new products. And then what happens is, over in China, they totally cut and paste our innovations and put it on their websites. This is what we're competing against. They're using slave labor to compete against us. They're debasing their currency. The stakes are so unfair for the American worker. Let's just try to have things fair, and we're going to whoop them. We're going to hire millions of people throughout our country. You got to remember, 50% of Americans don't own stock. Millions of Americans don't have $250 in any kind of war chest, emergency fund. Why is that? That's because they're working at jobs where they can't get paid well.
So among those who own stock are your employees, because you offer your employees a 401k match. Have any of them said anything to you about their concerns about the direction of the stock market, particularly any who might be close to retirement?
We absolutely have had a couple people anxious about their stock market, about the stock market. But again, you know, our goal is that we're going to sell millions more dollars, so we have to hire many more people. If we do that, we're going to hire them at very good jobs, with very good pay, wonderful benefits with the 401k match. True, there's some companies that have been buying T-shirts from Vietnam and China, and they're going to have to pay a couple more bucks for a T-shirt. And then the American consumer is going to have to pay more for a T-shirt. That's obviously not pleasant for those American consumers. But I think there's going to be an overwhelming surge of hiring in America as things level out, as American factories ramp up and people have to hire talent, buy machines. We've invested money in buying new machines because we're so enthusiastic, so optimistic about the future. That's going to start happening throughout the nation, and people are going to be leaning into the future. This is a very exciting time for the American manufacturing worker. We're going to be able to pull people from poverty into the middle class that used to not have an avenue. They had no shot at getting into the middle class. We're going to be able to offer them a shot.
If Drew Greenblatt was my CEO, I would actually take lower wages to work for this dude. And the average viewer of CNN can't wrap their minds around this, okay? Remember, CNN caters to rich white liberals. They don't understand the working class. As a matter of fact, they'd sell the working class down the river if it means that they get a little more of social clout. That's how terrible these rich white liberals actually are at their core. Their hearts are black, their minds are smooth, and there's nothing going on of value in their own circles. They don't understand that U.S. Steel has degenerated so far that Pittsburgh, by the way, the home of the Steelers, the NFL team, the Steelers no longer represent the working class of Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is now what's the best way to define it? They had to pivot about a decade ago and become one of the more tech-savvy cities. So they're full of these West Coast yuppies, and truth be told, they're not a working-class city anymore. And that's where a whole lot of people have moved from. They've moved from the Rust Belt down south, either because their jobs have dried up or because their jobs have moved elsewhere. That's what happens when Democrat policy strangles you to the point where you can't breathe anymore and you move elsewhere. So Drew Greenblatt is beyond thankful that Donald Trump is trying something different with these tariffs, because he's making the manufacturing era of the Rust Belt dollarable again. This is sort of a problem with the old national parks. Back when we were starting the National Park Service, I'm sorry, I am going somewhere with this tangent. When we started the National Park Service, Congress didn't want to give it any money. They didn't really care about these areas. They wanted to log it and mine it into oblivion. And then presidents came along and said, no, we need to preserve these areas. And finally, someone came up with the idea that let's make these areas dollarable. That means market these areas in a different light. Show that these areas are better than the European Alps. Show that these areas are better than Niagara Falls. Show that these areas out west and east of the country, there are some beautiful places in our eastern seaboard. The Appalachian Mountains, just to name a place. But my point is that in order to make the national parks viable, you needed to make it dollarable. And that's the problem with U.S. manufacturing right now. There is so much money to be had in other nations. Mexico, for instance, NAFTA. After watching a slow decline of our manufacturing arena, after watching a slow decline of our manufacturing, the NAFTA agreement basically made Mexico an incredibly wealthy nation, which they've completely squandered, but they also have been able to take some power from the Chinese nationals and moved it into other parts of Southeast Asia. So that is basic capitalism, that is basic trade, that's history in a nutshell. So there's something deeper going on here that Jake Tapper doesn't fully understand, and that Drew Greenblatt fully understands. And that is a little, almost a throwaway line here that Drew Greenblatt was talking about. And he's talking about what China is trying to do and what they've already done to the American sector. They've basically taken America, they've mined it for information, they've stolen that data, and they're trying to facilitate it there in their own nation, and it's kind of failing. But to reiterate this point, Mr. Wang, which by the way is a CEO of a West Coast-based intelligence company, Mr. Wang cited an anecdote by a former head of research and development for a Fortune 100, not 500, 100 company, who told him that the person he entrusted the most, someone so close that their children grew up together, was eventually found to be on the payroll of the Chinese Communist Party. What does this have to do with tariffs then? Well, simply put, if the Chinese Communist Party is stealing our information, and they're trying to change their own economy to basically eclipse that of the West, particularly the United States, that means that there needs to be something we can do as a nation to deal with them. We can't sanction them like we do with Russia and Belarus, but we can tariff them. That's the whole point and purpose of these tariffs. It's not to punish the American consumer. That's going to happen. That's a terrible terrible byproduct, but it's the best weapon we have in our arsenal. We can't sanction China because too much of world trade is centered around them. So we're going to have to do something different. While they've been stealing our information, while they have been trying to unlock American secrets, which, by the way, that's just good old-fashioned elbow grease in our culture, in Western culture, that the Chinese can't fully comprehend because they got their own thing going on. But the whole point and purpose of these tariffs are an attempt to get back something that which was stolen. Drew Greenblatt understands this, and like I said, if I had to work a different job, I'd love to work for this dude, and I'd work for lower wages, even though it's in the state of Maryland, which is poorly run by Democrats, because we know Democrats can't govern, but that's the sad truth of this whole situation. These tariffs are an attempt to bring back something that was stolen. Okay? I think that's the best way I can put this, but let me know what you think down in the comments below. Let me know if tariffs are hitting you yet, because we need to see what we can do to bring back a middle-class style job like manufacturing in order to make America wealthy again, in order to make people in Appalachia, in the Rust Belt, have some good jobs for the next 20, 35 years in order to ensure that their families have food on the table and property that they can own. That's the American dream here. Folks, my name is Brian. Hope you enjoyed that segment here on Politibrawl. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Catch you on the next one. And until then, y'all have a good one.